Another month bites the dust. February 2026. What have I been reading? Hello, welcome to my channel. Another Bibliophile Reads. My name is Greg, and I'm going to do a very fast wrap-up of all the books that I have been reading for February 2026. I am still sort of in my Read What You Own challenge. It's the challenge where I'm challenging myself to read 25,000 pages of books that I already own before buying another book. I have made a short video of my sort of failure. I will leave a link to that in the description of this video. But I have a lot of books to discuss, and I will be going through them roughly thematically rather quickly. The first event that I want to talk about is Holmes is Where the Heart Is. This is an annual reading event dedicated to reading about Sherlock Holmes, either stories by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle or other writers writing about Sherlock Holmes. There was a live stream the other day with myself, Jim at Mystery and Mayhem, Alan at Big Hard Books and Classics, Randy, the Literate Texan, and J. Scott Phillips. We spent about an hour and a half talking about Sherlock Holmes, and if you like Sherlock Holmes, go check out that video. But the first book that I read for this event was West End Horror by Nicholas Meyer. This is a Sherlock Holmes pastiche. That means the original author is not Sherlock Holmes. It's another author just writing about that character. And this was an entertaining story. Not great, but it features some interesting side characters. George Bernard Shaw, Oscar Wilde, Gilbert and Sullivan, and my favorite cameo, Bram Stoker, who in this novel was in the middle of writing his famous novel, Dracula. This is a fun little mystery, but again, not great. The second Sherlock Holmes book that I read was Over the Entire Month, and that was by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, and that was his first collection of short stories, The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. As I said, I read this, a story every Friday and some other days in the week because I wanted to complete this collection in February. This is a good starting place if you have not read Sherlock Holmes before. This actually came up in the live stream where we were asked, where's the best place to start reading about Sherlock Holmes? I said the first novel and the first introduction to Sherlock Holmes, which is the novel A Study in Scarlet. And I basically got outvoted. The other fellows said The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes is the best place to start. Maybe it is, and it's a good collection of short stories. Fer-De-Lance by Rex Stout. This is the first novel in the long-running Nero Wolfe series. Nero Wolfe is a brilliant man, but he is enormously fat. He rarely leaves his brownstone building in New York City, but he has a very able assistant named Archie who does all the lead work for him. And people come to Nero Wolfe with a mystery, something to solve. In this case, a young Italian woman comes to Nero Wolfe, asking Nero Wolfe to find out where her missing brother is. Well, it goes very much beyond a missing man case into multiple murders. What's really, truly interesting is just how this series works. Because I said, Nero Wolfe never leaves his brownstone, so far as I know. Yet he is able to solve all these mysteries just in his head. There is some non-canonical beliefs about Nero Wolfe that Rex Stout didn't confirm, but he wouldn't deny. There are some rumors that Nero Wolfe is the illegitimate son between Sherlock Holmes and Irene Adler. If you do not know who Irene Adler is, go read the Sherlock Holmes story, A Scandal in Bohemia. But this novel was just a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to reading more Rex Stout mysteries in the future. The last book that I read was The Prisoner of the Devil by Michael Hardwick. This, again, is a pastiche novel. This is where Sherlock Holmes gets involved in the very famous and historical Dreyfus Affair. This is about a Jewish artilleryman in France who was basically convicted of espionage. And a lot of people thought he was innocent. And it was just a huge scandal at the time. And Sherlock Holmes gets involved in the case. Now, the problem with this story is that history is set in fact, and Sherlock Holmes has to stay on the sidelines because he's not a real character. So the author has to follow history and has to follow the real resolution of what happened to Alfred Dreyfus. And ultimately, it just did not work very well. Also, I found the writing a little clunky and not very clear, but mostly he also wasn't very true to the character of Sherlock Holmes or John Watson. This is a very unsatisfying book, but if you're a fan of Sherlock Holmes, you might want to check it out. I would also be remiss in failing to mention the passing of our friend Sean D. Steadfast. Sean D. Steadfast was going to be a co-host for Holmes Where the Heart Is this year, and he was looking forward to it before he passed away. And we all agreed that this month's reading of Sherlock Holmes would be dedicated in his memory. Farewell, Sean. You were quite a guy, quite an eccentric, and what a reader. The next group of books is with a reading event I was doing with Alan at Big Hard Books and Classics. And we were reading Gravity's Rainbow from January through February. I have a lot of ambivalent feelings about this book. It is part brilliance and part confusion. There are parts of this book that are absolutely fascinating and parts of this book that are absolutely frustrating. I did create a video just talking about this book, but going through the editing, I decided that video was pretty much a failure, and it's not going to see the light of day unless I refilm it. Maybe I should, because people should be talking about Gravity's Rainbow. You should probably try to read Gravity's Rainbow, because even though they said it's fascinating and frustrating, it's a novel that everyone should dip their toes into at least once. Along with Gravity's Rainbow, I read this book, or should I say, I looked at this book. This is pictures showing what happens on each page of Thomas Pynchon's Gravity's Rainbow by Zach Smith. Zach Smith is an avant-garde artist who looked at the text of Gravity's Rainbow, and from each page he drew out an image of what he found and made a painting or a drawing of what he found. And I'll just show a couple of these. The way I read Gravity's Rainbow was each morning I read about 13 to 15 pages of the novel and then looked at the corresponding 13 to 15 pages in this book. Sometimes I could recognize the image from what I read earlier in the day. Sometimes it wasn't all that clear, but still fascinating. Is it worth it? I don't really think so. This collection of pictures obviously took a lot of dedication and a lot of work. But after finishing Gravity's Rainbow and after finishing this book, I said most people could pass on this picture book. I think that's the right approach. Another project that I've been working on is reading all the Hainish novels of Ursula K. Le Guin. This is a Voxer group read started by Gareth at Book Songs and Other Magic, and we are reading through all the Hainish novels of Ursula K. Le Guin. And in the beginning of the month, I read her second Hainish novel, Planet of Exile. Later in the month, I got a little ahead of myself and read City of Illusions, which is the third of the Hainish novels. Planet of Exiles is about a group of humans from Earth stranded on an alien world. This alien world has some local intelligent inhabitants that are almost human, but not quite. And on this world, there are very long winters, 60 years, so the local inhabitants have to prepare for these very long winters, and there is trouble brewing, and the humans have to interact with the local species. I think this book was a big improvement from her first book, Rocannon's World, but it shared a lot with Rocannon's World because Rocannon's World was essentially a non-technological society, almost like a fantasy novel, and on this planet, again, it's a low technology world. almost like a fantasy novel, but it's a science fiction novel. And I also read City of Illusions. I was supposed to read this in March, or should be reading it in March. I just got a head start. And this is a story of one of the descendants from Planet of Exile who manages to make his way back to Earth. But Earth is vastly different from what their historical books said it should be. There was an alien species that basically conquered Earth and the other human worlds, and has made it essentially a non-technological world. And something has happened to this man, and he is wandering, trying to find his true identity. Now, again, this is a bit of an improvement in my mind over Planet of Exile. I'm getting to see how Ursula K. Le Guin is gaining her strength as a science fiction author. And again, pretty good. Not Ursula K.'s best work, but pretty good. I have another project that I'm doing with Chris at Liminal Spaces, where we have a group read on my Discord channel. We're going through the 4 novels of Yukio Mishima's Sea of Fertility tetralogy. This is the second book. This is following the main character Honda from the first novel. In the first novel, he was a young man just getting into adulthood. And this one, he's a judge. He's about 36 years old. And he meets a boy who may be the reincarnation of one of the other characters from the first book. And it goes on from there. This is a very heavily political book about the politics of Japan at the time. I am no expert in Japanese politics, so parts of this book were rather confusing. There is a section in this book which is essentially its own novella, setting up a political ideology to restore Japan to its imperial beginning, because not everyone likes the new democracy that Japan is becoming. Like the first book, I feel that reading this book is very distant. This book was written for a Japanese audience, and I don't know enough about Japan to truly appreciate all of its nuances. You can go check out my Discord channel where people are making comments. And next month, we'll be going on to the Temple of the Dawn. I have my own personal challenge where I am going to be reading a book from the NYRB Classics publisher every month. And in February, I chose Nadja by André Breton. This is a novel translated from the French. André Breton is one of the most famous surrealists at the time. And this novel is sort of a memoir, sort of a fictionalization of a relationship with a woman that he chose to call Nadja in this book. This book is just peculiar. It doesn't really tell a whole story. It is just his encounter with this woman, no real other plot. There are parts of it that I said are absolutely real. There was a woman that he based this on. But reading this, I just was not engaged. He did not have an engaging style. It was not a very interesting story. And mostly, this novel does not describe the surrealist movement strong enough for me. I know there was a surrealist movement in the beginning of the 20th century. I've read a little bit about it, but I wanted to learn more. And I did not learn more from this book. And it's also a curious book. There are lots of photographs of some of the characters and some of the places that you might meet in Paris in this early part of the 20th century. Should other people read it? I don't know. If you're interested in surrealism, I would suggest picking up a textbook and learning more about surrealism before picking up this book. I should have done it, but I didn't, which is probably why I find this book a little dissatisfactory. I wanted to get ahead of my March reading again. For my March NYRB Classics, I read The Strangers in the House by Simenon, translated from the French. This will also count for my book to read for March Mystery Madness as a book in translation. This is the story of a lawyer who's a bit of a drunkard. His wife has left him, and he's living in his home with his wild daughter, let's just say it that. And one day, a dead man turns up in his house, murdered. And this is a story of how he has to find out who murdered this man and why. This book was originally published in 1940, so the height of World War II. You don't get a lot of World War II in this book. It's like it's a world apart. As Simenon was just writing a novel to not remind people that they're in the middle of a war. Is it a great book? Not really. Simenon has written some great Maigret novels, and some of those I really like, but this one was just an ordinary novel. Interesting enough to finish, but I couldn't recommend it very highly. LaValle Comics, An Epic Search for Truth. This is a graphic novel about the life of Bertrand Russell, the famous English philosopher and mathematician. This book was recommended to me on one of my live streams or in the comments of one of my videos. I don't know who recommended this to me. It was recommended a number of years ago, and it's been sitting on my shelf just waiting for me to read. The framing of this story is Bertrand Russell. He is going to a lecture. World War II is just getting going. America is not yet involved, and he is confronted by the people who want to remain isolationist. And they remind Bertrand Russell that during World War I, he was a staunch pacifist. But will Bertrand Russell remain a pacifist for World War II? Well, you'll have to read this graphic novel to find out. This is called a graphic novel. The authors mentioned in the afterword that they take some liberties with the truth, and they do not feel comfortable calling this a work of nonfiction because Bertrand Russell meets some people, has some conversations with people that he would not have had done in the real world. But it's a fascinating look at the history of mathematics and the history of philosophy in the early part of the 20th century, if you like that sort of thing. On my Kindle, I read The Ballad of Black Tom by Victor LaValle. Victor LaValle is an African-American writer living in New York City. He mainly writes horror. He likes the writings of H.P. Lovecraft. H.P. Lovecraft was a notorious racist. And in a podcast quite a number of years ago, I was listening to Victor LaValle describe why he liked H.P. Lovecraft. And he said it created a bit of a conflict in him because he recognizes that H.P. Lovecraft was a racist. And one of the most racist stories that H.P. Lovecraft wrote was The Horror at Red Hook, all about those evil immigrants in New York City. So what LaValle did was he wrote a side story involving the original Horror at Red Hook, the events in that story, but he introduces a new character, a black character, who is going to get involved with the cosmic horrors. And he did this to say, I can still like H.P. Lovecraft, even though he is a racist. I can create this story, this racist story, into my own. And he did a very good job at that. I did also reread The Horror at Red Hook before reading this novel, or should I say, this was also a reread for me. I was doing a buddy read with Michelle Claire, because we wanted to see, was H.P. Lovecraft truly a racist in Horror at Red Hook? Yes. And we read The Ballad of Black Tom just to get a different view on that story. And eventually we are going to be reading At the Mountains of Madness by H.P. Lovecraft, his only novel, who Michael K. Vaughan says shows evidence that maybe Lovecraft was lightening up on his racist views. We were supposed to read that novella in February. I got too busy, and we're going to have to reschedule that read for March or April. I reread It Can't Happen Here by Sinclair Lewis. This was a buddy read with Gavin at Genre Reads. Gavin is reading a science fiction novel for the past 100 years, and for 1935, he picked It Cannot Happen Here, so we read this together. It Can't Happen Here isn't really a science fiction novel, although if you stretch it a bit, you can call it that. But this novel is a non-factual look at the rise of fascism in the United States during the 30s. There are some really eerie parallels to what Sinclair Lewis was writing in this novel way back when, to what is happening in the United States here and now in 2026. Is this a great novel? No, it's not really a great novel, but I do recommend that people read this because we need to look at the past. People were thinking about how America could turn into a fascist nation. And in this novel, it did. And it seems to be that someone is sort of following the clues of this book. Or are these not clues, but just a parallel development? You can read this book and find out for yourself. I did record a discussion with Gavin about this book. It is an hour long, but it will not be released until May. Check it out upon its release. It was a good discussion. For my in-person book group, I listened to the audiobook The Berry Pickers by Amanda Peters. This is a novel with 2 points of view. One point of view, Joe is an Indian man from Canada, and his family were berry pickers in Maine during the late 50s or early 60s, and he describes how his younger sister disappeared. She was about 4 years old. He was about 6 years old, but his family never forgot their little girl who disappeared. And the second point of view is a woman named Norma. It's pretty clear to the reader that Norma is Joe's little sister, Ruthie, who disappeared. And these two stories run independently until the end of the book when they merge. I did not really like this book. I thought there were a lot of details that needed to be flushed out, that the author just sort of glossed over, such as how can a family just appear with a little girl and not explain where she came from? And it was a little too emotional for me. It's a very emotionally charged novel, and that does not usually work for me. But I will say that the other ladies in my in-person book group, for the most part, really enjoyed this book, and I was the outlier not enjoying it. Let me describe 2 final audiobooks that I listened to during this month. On Democracy by E.B. White. E.B. White is more famously known as the author of Charlotte's Web and a co-author of The Elements of Style. On Democracy is his collection of essays and editorials to the newspapers about politics of the time, beginning in the 30s and running up to about the 60s. E.B. White was a very staunch supporter of democracy, and there are a lot of parallels they can read into our modern times. You could just imagine how incensed E.B. White would have been if he'd been alive in 1916 when this collection was published, because he would not have liked where this country is going. Lastly, I listened to a children's book. This came as a recommendation from MJ at Reading This Life. MJ reads this book every December, I think. It is The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse. Inspiring Conversations on Hope, Love, and Personal Growth by Charlie Mackesy. This book is only about an hour long on audio. It is the story of a boy. He has a friend who is a mole, and he meets a fox and a horse, and it's all about their friendship. It's really rather charming, and I can understand why MJ likes it so much. I have also been reading a short story every day. For the month of February, a lot of these short stories are going to be the Sherlock Holmes stories from the adventures of Sherlock Holmes. My favorite non-Holmes story probably was The Gentle Assassin by J.G. Ballard. This was a science fiction story about time travel and has a very nice twist for a time travel story, one that I can appreciate. Go check them all out in the description of this video if you are interested. Okay, that is everything that I read for the month of February. I am still technically on my Read What You Own challenge, and I read 4,785 pages of ebooks, books, and audiobooks. 385 pages don't count because I took them from the library and they were unowned. So I can only count 4,400 pages of those books towards my goal. But I did read 1,014 pages of short stories. So that would bring my February total to 5,412 pages. My grand total since starting this challenge is now up to 22,874 pages. So if my math is correct, I have finished 91.49% of my Read What You Own challenge. I will definitely be done very soon. Thank you for watching, and keep on reading.